Hello YouTube, this is Mars Gaming and welcome back to another ESO commentary. This commentary is basically a guide for improving your practice for ESO PvP. This guide is built for players who are either starting out in PvP and looking to become more serious, or someone looking to vastly improve their game. ESO PvP, from my opinion, is a long journey depending on the level of play you desire to get to. This guide will help improve your game faster, as well as improve your learning curve and give you good techniques to improve faster. What type of content do you want to play is really the first topic. For ESO PvP, there are three different types of platforms. There's open world, which is Cyrodiil, there's battlegrounds, and there's also dueling. Each one of these requires a specific type of tactic and play style, with the only exception is you're killing another person. This also means you need to observe the type of builds that other players are using, as well as classes, weapons, potions, and poisons. Those also come into play since there's so many variables that come into the game already. Whatever content you choose will be your decision. If you're a new player, I would suggest Cyrodiil non-champion point campaigns or battlegrounds if you want to get the feel for if you want to get the feel for group play. Group play is very important for most scenarios, and you want to get used to that immediately. So I would say definitely do those. But if you want to do more one-on-ones, try dueling. But you want to duel people at your own skill level. You don't want to just jump to you don't want to just challenge anyone. So I suggest you find a friend who's or make friends with someone who's also around your level and your skill level. If you're more advanced, focus more on battlegrounds and open world, I would say. Your ability to play the objective well and survive at the same time will help you improve as a player much faster than the alternative. That's just how I feel about it. Next is understanding your skill level. The best way to gauge your skill is to watch other players and PvP a lot, and constantly compare your play styles and your skills to someone else. You'll be able to determine what you're lacking at and where you need to improve when you do this. It also helps tweak your own play style. When you learn where you are as a player, you can see where you need to improve and see what you're doing wrong. After this, you start to at this point you start to develop more skill, and you tend to improve, and you begin to engage the level of skill of your opponents. This means you should see how good or bad they are. You can tell when they start to make mistakes. Like if you tend to play against a lot of higher skill Templar and you start to see average Templars, you'll be able to determine how to play against that average Templar a lot better. So at this point, you should have a devised tactic to beat most people and survive longer against really good players. This comes with a lot of repetition. You have to practice a lot, or play a lot, I would say. Next is to focus on your strengths and improve your weaknesses. Each class has their own strengths and weaknesses, as well as the player. Understanding them is the first part of improving, because you'll make a conscious effort to make the right changes with repetition. If you aren't healing through damage or timing your burst correctly, or you have poor positioning and movement, then you're probably you definitely need to make the adjustments for that. Poor movement is really what gets you killed against most classes. Most importantly, reaction time and decision making is also the key to success. For example, if you fight a lot of Nightblades in duels, you have to really know when their burst combo when they tend to set up their burst combo, because if you constantly get killed by it, you're making a bad decision. You're making poor decisions on how to fight them. For example, if they're setting up for their Assassin Scourge, they're probably coming in for a heavy attack into an end cap and then finishing off with the Assassin Scourge. So you need to be able to either avoid the end cap or know when it's coming and get ready to disrupt it by stunning them, or setting up your own burst combo before they come in with the attack. It all comes with practice. Next is consuming material new and old, and record your own gameplay. There's a lot of content you can learn from that is new and old. This means you can use it as a medium to see what confident players are doing right and wrong. The best content to see is raw footage, so you can see mistakes and not just the best possible footage. When I say raw footage, I mean literally uncut footage. You don't want to just look at PvP montages. They're not a good indication of how PvP actually works in this game. Some of them are good. Some of them have good points that you can learn from, but they're not always the best scenarios. You need to be looking at the worst possible scenarios and some of the good or better scenarios in a fight, because it doesn't really teach you how to survive if you just look at montages. Some of them are really good, but focus on footage that teaches you, especially if you don't understand something about a class, because the majority of the time it's a lack of understanding that leads to someone losing a fight, or just mistakes. Constant mistakes usually lead to that. This also goes into excuse me. This also goes in tandem with your own footage. You should review what you did right and wrong, as well as seeing where your build and playstyle lacks. A lot of this focuses on trial and error and your ability to make less mistakes. Focus more on what you're doing correctly, looking at it over and over, replicate what you did, improve it, and try to do it better each time. Same goes for your weaknesses. Figure out how to make them less prevalent. Think about how they are exploited and plan for that. Footage is also good for seeing things that you didn't see before. For example, I'm going to use myself as an example. There was I almost died in one of the parts of in a battleground match, and I wasn't being focused by the enemy. I was like, I took a lot of damage. I didn't see what happened. When I look back at the footage, I was stepped in like two different AoEs, and one guy behind me was hitting me off with a lightning staff, so I got minor concussed, and he also had a crusher enchant applied to it, and then someone leaped and almost killed me, and I got lucky and turtled up, got out of there and healed up. One of the major mistakes I did was running in there without anybody beside me. Literally nobody on my team was beside me, and it was like the two other teams clashing. I tend to have a bad habit of just running into fights and not thinking about it, but that's something I've worked on already. I saw what happened. I made the adjustment, and I have a conscious thought process about it. It's just one thing. It's one thing on how to look at things when you look at footage, and it helps you improve. Definitely helps improve your survivability and your ability to finish players off. Next is researching other classes. When you understand how other classes work, it makes it easier to survive against them more, or counter them. Almost all players, really, some players play the class very similar to other players. Like, most Nightblades play like almost every other Nightblade. You'll find a few that don't, or you'll find a few Magic DKs that play. You'll find a few Magic DKs that play completely different than other DKs, or you find some that play exactly the same. You can look at that, and you can constantly look at that and just make decisions on how you can counter them. Usually you have to play a lot slower and play a lot more cautiously against certain classes, and then form up your burst rotation around their burst. You can counter them, but you have to pay attention and focus at what you're looking at. That's one of the best ways to do that. So, going more into this, for the best results on learning about different classes, I suggest going. There's plenty of ESO websites that show all of the classes in detail, as well as going to a lot of channels on YouTube and watching gameplay on them. I suggest watching the classes and learning. I suggest learning the abilities first from each class. For example, you want to learn more about Nightblades, you need to learn all the abilities that a Nightblade uses, that the average Nightblade uses and has in their kit, as well as watching a lot of raw footage on Nightblades. So I suggest watching streams when you have the chance, People who stream Nightblade, they tend to play the pretty common style of Nightblade, so that would definitely help you out. Next is watching better players duel. This is watching live fights will give you the opportunity to see how experienced players play, and you can employ their tactics to your own game. It might be challenging if you're probably a stamina Dragon Knight like me, since there's not a whole lot of stamina Dragon Knight players. I would suggest just playing against a whole bunch of other classes and developing your own play style. Eventually, you really will develop your own play style. There just aren't that many stamina Dragon Knights on the NA server, but you tend to run into them and you tend to learn from them. But just work on developing your own play style. Really, that's what I would suggest. And the last part is be positive and never stop improving. You want to really just be a good sport. Just be a good guy. Focus heavily on improving. Even if someone like beats you like constantly, don't worry. Don't let it get you down. Don't let it deter you from the game. And even if they use like really cheesy tactics, it's just a play style. And if you can't beat them, probably someone else can. So always think there's always better players. There's always better players that can counter something. So don't let that deter you. This game is really fun, and you should definitely dedicate time to PvP. And I think that's about it. I want to say thanks again for watching. I hope this guide helps you out. And have a great day.